Benny Mailman, very fascinating, well-traveled man. He was born in Wisconsin. He eventually went into the military, into the Marines. When he came back, he went to university. Then he started a comedy career in Las Vegas. He was riding one of those ride taxis, those bike taxis, in Las Vegas, and Denver, and Los Angeles, Orlando, and New York. Great stories about some of those travels and how he did in comedy. Then he just decided to up and go to Russia, take the the Trans-Siberian train to Beijing, stops in Mongolia, then eventually makes his way over to Cambodia, where he lives now with a wife. And just an incredible story, inspiring. He's written 2 books on his travels. Just a really great conversation about Benny Mailman, 42. That's the age that he made this change, and how we talk about inspiration and what drove him to do that, and the experiences all the way through. Really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business? And it lasted over 25 years. Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission: how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers, and how it helped them. Our podcast vision: growth through learning from others. Joey Pin's Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. So much to ask you. So much to talk to you about. I appreciate your time. What time is it in Cambodia now? It's 5:30 here, New York time.
5:30 a.m. I'm exactly 12 hours ahead of you.
12 hours ahead.
So if you need to know anything about the future,
Yeah, I was gonna say, did the Knicks win? That's a project.
there you go.
Is travel the best education?
I, in respects to being human, yes. In the respect of understanding why we're here, or understanding if I mean I'm sorry, it is 5:30 in the morning, so my
Yeah,
thoughts are still
sure,
a
sure.
little bit groggy too. But when I say we, I know some people spend a lot of time, and I am one of those people who has have always inquired myself, a lot of questions about myself. Why am I here? Why are we here? There's a lot of things that I do not understand about this life.
Hmm.
Uh, and when you go out and you travel and you start seeing people in other countries and cultures, and how much that we actually have in common,
Hmm.
and you realize there are differences, of course, and I think that's what makes us unique. But it is travel is the great teacher. It really is.
Far too often, especially here in the States, I have so many friends who's never left the country, or even worse, never left the state that they're in. It's quite tragic. And of course, it's a difficult time now with the where we are, and hopefully ending the pandemic. But certainly before, there's really no excuses.
I find that is something that is a little bit strange to me. Is that one of the worst world traveled countries is the United States. And I
Hmm.
talk about in book one, I talk about how people love in the United States to go to the Caribbean,
Hmm.
or they go to Cancun and Puerto Vallarta, the Dominican, like I said, the Bahamas,
Hawaii.
Jamaica.
Yeah.
Yes, places, especially the ones that are all inclusive, are not really a strong representation of the actual culture
Right.
that people are in. It's not you're I remember I went to Cancun in the mid '90s when I was in college, and thinking this is basically America, but the people that are helping you out, most of them don't speak English. That was the difference.
I might have saw you there, Ken, Benny. I was there in the I went to spring break there in the '90s myself. Yeah, I'll just tell you a quick story. 10 years old, my father's an Italian immigrant. I'm 10 years old. I'm in New Haven, Connecticut, outside of New York, and my first day of day after school, my father gives me a suitcase and says, "Hey, put your clothes in here." Proceeds to bring me to the bus station in New Haven, tells the bus driver to drop me off Terminal 1 at JFK, shows me a picture of my grandmother. You're going to meet your grandmother in Milan. So I get a 10-year-old with a suitcase, get on the bus, takes me to JFK. I talk to somebody, I get on a plane, I fly to Milan. I look for my grandmother and uncle, and I'm there every other summer all the way through college. So very fortunate.
Wow.
Yeah, very fortunate that I got to spend a lot of time in Europe and see the different culture there. And like you said, even though it's so far away, that's really, really similar. Now you're born 3.5 pounds in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I've got friends in
Yes.
Green Bay. I've been there very often. Great people. I love it. Don't like it there in the winter. I've never been, but I hear. But
Same.
yeah, same as you. Yeah, and but you were
Yes.
on a farm with your own vegetables and with a bobsled bringing, I'm sorry, a toboggan bringing your stuff down. I mean, you had a rough. I shouldn't say rough. You just had your own childhood.
I, Joey, you can say rough. When I was a
Okay.
kid, I thought it was the worst.
Did you really?
The absolute, like, other kids are getting allowances and playing Atari at the time. Remember, Atari was the big video game, a game of tanks and biplanes and very simple
That's right.
games.
Remember that.
And I was out pulling. We had a. I grew up in a log cabin that my father built actually from a kit,
Wow.
and we had animals up in the barn. And at that time, now, as soon as the kids moved away, my parents built a small barn right by the house. So
Wow.
while we were growing up, the barn was about 200 yards away. And anybody that grew up in strong winters, especially in Wisconsin, we can get a good deal of snow. And we had to put water on a toboggan and pull it up Rocky style up to the barn to water the animals. So that was, and in the summer when there wasn't snow, we carried those 5 gallon water jugs, one in each hand, and carried them up to the barn.
My goodness. Wow. And so at 18, off you went into the Marines. I mean, would you just want to
Yeah,
get out of?
figured that would be easier.
Yeah. And you were stationed in Japan and in Okinawa, and that was
Mhm.
93. And what was that like?
That was all the way up until '92. I got out in '92, so I was there for 2.5 years. Uh,
Wow.
Not that it stuck in my head, Joey, but December 5th, 1989, I was on a plane to Okinawa, Japan,
Wow.
and wondering a lot of things. But I think the 10-year-old self that you were talking about going to Milan, a lot of times you just understand that this is what's happening, this is what's going on. And so
Hmm.
I've always been a person that has thought I'll deal with it when I get there and first see what the situation is. There's no need to worry about anything until you actually get there, because your mind will
Hmm.
be quite inaccurate as it tries to play psychic for what could happen for you.
Very interesting approach. Yeah, I have similar. I'll kind of deal with it when I get there, try to be prepared as possible. But a lot of people don't like that uncertainty. But obviously, you're not
Yeah.
one. So you come back, you go to University of Wisconsin, and then you go to 99. You go to Vegas to be a comedian.
Yes. That was,
What a curve! What's happening?
yeah, nobody saw it as more of a curve than my father, who
Mm,
would constantly remind me that I am a honorably discharged Marine Corps veteran with
mm,
a bachelor's degree, and I am going to Las Vegas to do stand up. He had lists of jobs that were available to me and where I could make a decent living, is how he framed it. And I think the difficult idea for parents to wrap their heads around, if they have a child that wants to do anything in the arts,
mm,
anything that is not 100% secure. Humans love safety. We love to know that something is going to has a high percentage of making us happy. And when a parent knows that you have the credentials to go out and get
mm,
those good jobs, and yet you choose to follow a path of art, it worries the parents.
mm.
But the artist is never worried. Right? The
That's
artist is
true.
like, okay, I'm going to be hungry. I'm going to sleep in my car tonight. I slept in my car after doing a stand up in Pasadena one evening. And that was just, it was nothing. It was just what you did: saved money, slept in the car, got up the next morning, and drove to the next place.
Wow. But were you? Did you have comedian aspirations? Did you have people that you followed? Why? I mean, you were a communications major, but why comedy? In the military, were you funny? Were you funny at the farm with your family? Why
I
comedy?
was, I grew I grew into comedy because when I was a young boy, I had buck teeth, which,
Ah,
if anyone ever had somebody who had buck teeth in school, you know that they caught some razzing and some hazing. And so my way out of, and mind you, at a Catholic school in
mm,
Sparta, Wisconsin, St. Pat's, in fifth grade, the teacher was reading from the book in the front of the class. I was about second from the back, and I pulled off a firecracker in class, and that kind of set the wheels in motion as to being the
you
class clown. I ended up
literally
being,
you ignited a firecracker. You lit it. Are you speaking metaphorically?
no, it was a real firecracker.
Wow.
But it wasn't. For any of you that think I'm a pyro, it was a pull firecracker, one of
Oh,
those
I was
ones
a
that you
pull.
pull and it
Okay.
explodes
Okay.
inside a small classroom at a Catholic school. It was a very high magnitude earthquake.
Mm,
Uh, and when I got home, I remember I had to go sit in the library. That is where you went to sit if you were the bad boy or
sure.
the bad girl. So I'm in the library, and the teacher seemed relatively okay with it, and I
Huh.
could not understand why until I got home. I got off the bus, dropped me off, and my mom was working in the garden. She goes, "I've got good news and I've got bad news." And I said, "Uh oh, what's the good news?"
Wow,
She
you went
goes, "Your
good first.
teacher." Yeah, oh yeah. Always. I go, what's my leverage? what
Say-
what do I have? What am I working with here before I hear the bad?
say,
And she said, "Your teacher called today and told us about the firecracker." And I said, that's the good news? She goes, "Yeah, the bad news is your dad took the call
Ooh.
and he's waiting for you down at the house." And I said,
Is
that
it?
was about 100-yard walk of fear.
Mm. Wow. Wow. And you met in Vegas, you met Kay Cannon and Jason Sudeikis.
Yes, what I and not just I say them because they're the most well known. And Kay and Jason, beautiful souls, great
Yeah.
people. They were dating at that time. And I remember we went to see as a group, there were probably about 15 of us. Rebecca Krasny is uh, now she's Rebecca McCracken, but she and Kay Cannon are very close, and she is hilarious. A big group of us went to see the movie with Will Ferrell, Old School, when that came out, Old School. So here I am with Kay Cannon, Jason Sudeikis, and all my other friends watching Will Ferrell on the big screen. And then within a year, Jason was on his way to Saturday Night
Saturday
Live,
Night Live,
and it
sure.
was. I've always been so thrilled and so happy when my friends make it into a bigger arena
Mm.
of what they want to do artistically, and I'm just so happy for them. If I could quickly say, I moved to New York City eventually,
Yeah.
and I was used to go down to Upright Citizens Brigade and watch their improv. I used to watch a young Aziz Ansari and just think, wow, this guy is incredibly talented.
Nice.
How come he's not famous? How is and eventually, it was not long after that. That would have been around 2007 uh, that he made it big. But after I was dating a woman in New York City, and I went to New York City strictly to do stand up.
Right.
So I would get as much as I could. And every Sunday they had a show called AssCat, ASSSSSSCAT, something like that. And you would get all the notorious improvisers up there. Amy Poehler, I believe she started the entire Upright Citizens Brigade,
Yeah.
and Horatio Sands would be there, and you never knew who was going to be there. And one day, Jason Sudeikis was there, and my girlfriend at the time said, "Oh, if you know him." She thought I was lying because you know, drop name dropping,
Sure.
and she said, you don't know him. I go, well, we'll wait for him because it's a small venue. And when he came out, I said hello, and his eyes lit up. I didn't know how it would go. He was getting pretty famous in his own right at that time on Saturday Night Live, and he was absolutely a class act. Shook my hand. How are you doing, Benny? What are you up to? And we talked for about 10 minutes
Wow.
and shook hands and parted ways. And then that woman just went, wow,
Very
you were
nice.
telling the truth.
Good catch. Very nice. Yeah, everybody always has great things to say about Jason. Now, during this time, I mean, you were the starving artist, right? You still needed to make money, and you were doing a lot of bike taxi.
A lot, maybe too much. But
Must have big
that
calves.
was my, yeah, my legs were ridiculous. I remember in all, I spent about 16 years on the bike taxi
Wow.
in everywhere from Denver, Colorado, Las Vegas was where I got into it, Orlando, Florida with my friend Howard, New York City. And I remember in New York City, I looked down at my calves one day and they looked like do you remember Dorian Yates, the bodybuilder?
I do.
I I was like, wow, that looks like Dorian Yates' leg, like I borrowed it.
Wow. And you talk about experiences you had picking up people, and some of the stories were very, very entertaining.
Anytime you gave a ride in New York City, it was entertaining because you were with traffic. So you
Right.
have vehicles whizzing by you, and I think I said in the book you have to be quick or be dead in New York City. Like it was. I remember I picked somebody up on Lexington. I forget I should remember the hotel, but I forget on Lexington, and they had to get to the show. Nobody wants. I mean, these beautifully dressed, beautiful people with a lot of money do not want to jump in back of a bike. But when their show is at 8 o'clock and it's 10 minutes to 8
Hmm.
and it's pouring rain, so you know in New York City, if it's pouring rain, you're not getting a cab.
Right.
They had to take us. So I put them in the pedal cab or the bike taxi. And so they're protected, they're not getting wet. And then it becomes a game. And I remember going down, it was probably around 54th Street, and the thunder is cracking. And if you're in New York City during a
Mm.
thunderstorm and you're in between those buildings, number one, super windy.
Yes.
Number two, the water is flowing at you like a river.
In every
And
direction,
then
just bouncing off the
in every
buildings.
direction.
Yes, yeah.
And then the thunder, the same thing too. The sound is reverberating through, and it was a movie. I remember dropping this very finely dressed couple off at a show. It might have been Dirty Rotten Scoundrels,
Hmm.
and the guy he came out and he made eye contact with me, and he just kind of looked at me and he goes, "That was amazing." But yeah, a lot of stories from the bike taxi. People who tipped really well, and people rides that took you for a ride,
Hmm.
so to speak.
Is that right?
And you learn a lot about people, and I guess this would come a lot from waiters and waitresses would understand this too. You don't know where your good tips. Sometimes you think, "Wow, I'm going to get a great tip from these people," and nothing. And then sometimes you get a ride, and I used to give free rides out when people didn't have enough money, and uh, I could never. Okay, can I branch off into a quick story from
Sure, of
Denver?
course.
Okay. I was it was Christmas time actually. And I was giving a ride or I was looking for a ride on the 16th Street Mall, and I saw a family. They had two young girls with them. They were a young couple.
So this is
And one of the
Denver.
girls had this is Denver,
Yeah,
Colorado.
I know the 16th Street Mall well. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And so this was up actually, if you know, probably around Glenarm.
Okay.
Glenarm, which is up there by a lot of the hotels.
Yes.
And there was this family waiting for a bus, and I said, "Would you like a ride?" And they said, "We don't really have enough money for the ride." And they had a 3-year-old with them that they were holding, and the other daughter was probably about 5, straight. Reminded me of Laura Ingalls
Hmm.
from the Little
Little
House
House on
on
the
the
Prairie.
Prairie. And the young child, the teeth are coming in crooked, kind of like mine did. And she looked at me and smiled, and I said, "Just get in. Like, where are you going?" And they were going down to Larimer Square, so which is about 8 blocks away.
Yeah, not bad.
I said, "Oh, just get in.
Yeah.
Just get in."
Wow.
So they get in, and I'm giving them a fun ride, and the girls all happy and laughing. And there's nothing. There is no amount of money that you could give me that would replace a child's laughter. It's
Hmm.
just nourishing to the soul. So I dropped them off, and they said thank you. And then I remembered, oh yeah, this is free. And I said, yeah, have a good day. And about 2 hours later, I saw that same family going up the mall. And I said, hey, why don't you jump in the bike?
Wow.
Why not? Jump in, I'll give you a ride back up. And the young girl was all very happy and all smiles. And when they got in the bike, her mom, and I get goosebumps, this is sometimes hard for me to get out. Her mom looked at me and said, "Do you know what she said when you dropped us off?" And I said, "No, I don't know what she said." "Mommy, did God send him?"
Oh.
And it was, there are moments that come along in your life where you have an awareness, and you start to awaken, and you start to see the beauty and the love that's coming from other people. And that was one of the strongest moments I've ever had, was that moment.
How warm. Very, very cool. And from Denver, you decide to go way overseas. Now, did you start writing before then, or when you got to Cambodia? And why Cambodia?
uh, my initial journey, I was sitting in a snowstorm, and this is in the book too. I was sitting in or walking in a snowstorm in Denver, Colorado. I was actually sitting on my bike taxi, and it was cold, and it was snowing, and it was a solid blizzard. And I thought, there's got to be more to life than this.
Hmm.
Like, I'm a hamster chasing a piece of cheese or carrot that I'm not going to catch. I'm not going to be a millionaire. A lot of realization came into me around that age 42. And I said, I'm going to go on a journey. So my initial journey was to go to just to China, but I ended up going into Russia so that I could ride the Trans-Siberian into Mongolia and then into Beijing. And then from there, after China, it was actually a wing and a prayer. And I hadn't, the only writing I had done, Joy, that I was doing was by journal. For some reason, and I've never kept a journal in
Right.
my life, but something told me on that journey, write in a journal. Even if you, I hadn't intended to write a book, but just in case,
Hmm.
right? Also, that's why I went to Moscow strictly to ride the Trans Siberian Railroad. Because in my mind, I thought, if I am going to write a book, why not start out in Moscow taking the Trans Siberian? And so that's why I did it. So that was the only, I had done no writing up to that point other than in my book. Like I had a journal, but it wasn't really a journal. It was just notes of like poetry or thoughts that came to me. And anyway, after I got done with China, which is in book 2, I talk about going down into Vietnam for 30 days. And then I went into Cambodia because a friend of mine on the bike taxi said, "Hey, you're going to China. You should go to Cambodia."
Hmm.
Honest truth, I had no idea Cambodia was even over there. I
Hmm.
did not know where it was geographically. So he put that on. He told me about the temples of Angkor Wat,
Right.
said you need to go there. So that's why I came after Vietnam. It was logical to come back up through Cambodia. And that was the first time that I came to Cambodia.
Now,
And after that,
sorry.
oh, go ahead.
I want to talk about Russia. I want to talk about Moscow. What was the so you started journaling? You didn't know why. We'll get to Cambodia shortly, but you didn't know why. But you get to Moscow and you just start journaling. Now, is this stream of thought? Is just this is pen to paper, whatever's in your mind or what you see? Are you narrating it?
I was narrating it. I have the journal sitting to my right over here.
Hmm.
uh, Very interesting. And I doodled, right? So I'm not a great artist, but when I doodle, I know I have instant recollection of what I was looking at. Like I
Hmm.
would doodle a chair. When I was on Trans Siberian, I would doodle my surroundings and pen to paper, thought what was coming through. A lot of I wanted to annotate the myofascia of the trip, the
Hmm.
things that I would probably forget if I did not write it down.
Hmm.
As a comedian, one thing that I learned is if it comes into your head and it's hilarious and you don't write it down, it's gone.
Hmm.
Like whatever that amazing gem or piece of gold was that you had is gone. You have to write it down. So that's what I did. I wrote everything down. Um, the characters, mainly I view life as a movie, and people are coming in and out of our lives, and I wanted to make sure that I annotated even the most common simple people because that's what I am. I'm common and simple, and we make up the majority of the earth. So
Yeah. And Moscow itself is a very beautiful city. I hear their subway system is it's really beautiful and it's modern. How did you find Moscow and how was the train ride out of there?
it was Russia, if I could say in a word. I was a little bit too worried
Mm,
looking back on it now, going into Russia, grew up during the Ronald Reagan
I
years,
say.
and I thought that it might be very cold and crass
Mm,
towards visitors. And I did not find, whenever I went to ask directions from somebody, they looked like a 3-headed dragon was walking towards them. They were
wow.
very afraid to interact with me. But when they saw that I just wanted directions, they would smile and laugh with each other, and then they would point on the map where to go. The subway systems, you would get on an escalator, and it was like going from the top tier of a baseball stadium or a coliseum to the ground floor. They were
Wow.
very long. They were very long. And when you got down there, they were all their trains were absolutely to the second on time.
Wow.
I could not really read the when I was in the airport. I arrived. Everything was in English and in Russian, and I'm like, oh, thank goodness. Once you walk outside the doors of the airport, done.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I there I pick up on patterns really well, but I had such a difficulty deciphering the letters of the Russian alphabet. But the trains, fast and on time, and the subway systems, absolutely beautiful, beautiful art, meticulous, not there and not dirty. I was in New York City, and if you get down on the by the subways, it's not super clean, to
No.
put it nicely. But
No.
in Russia, they were actually meticulous. And this is their major city, Moscow, and it
Yes, sir.
was beautiful, on time. And I would get lost once in a while, but there was, I think it was the gray line that was I called it the save your butt line, where you could get on the gray line and it would get you to where um, it goes in a circle so you could get back to where you needed to go.
As kids, we're the same age. You're born in 70, I believe. I was born in 68, and we were told
Yes.
as kids that, that so many just lies about Russia. I mean, first of all, the women. We were told that there were these big, steroid taking, mustache wearing, ugly women. They turned out to be some of the most beautiful women in the world, blonde and sultry, and so I think the similar lie was told at their end. So yeah, when you were there, and they didn't know how to work with you. You didn't know how to work with them. Now, how old are you? And you're by yourself here, Benny. That's incredible that you do this by yourself.
42. I
You
was
did this at
42,
42.
and I was walking around, and I was cautious, but it was beautiful. I remember stepping off, and this is something I will never forget. And I think about I have a friend, Pat Obert, who is a big Metallica fan, Iron Maiden fan, and that
I
was a
love
lot of
Iron
my
Maiden.
soundtrack during my trip was Metallica and Iron
Mm,
Maiden. I stepped off the hop on, hop off bus in Red Square, right by St. Basil's Cathedral, and I had my headphones on, and Metallica's instrumental Orion was playing, and it was to me it was like I had arrived. I had created a reality for myself that was unparalleled. It was like I had created this dream world. I'm walking in Red Square, listening to Orion, looking at St. Basil's Cathedral, looking at the Kremlin. I was I was a constant smiling person at that point.
wow. Wow. So you take the Trans-Siberian and you go through eventually Beijing. Do you stop in Mongolia?
Stopped in Ulaanbaatar, the
Batar.
capital city of Mongolia, and I had met some amazing people in my book. Tommy B and Hilsey, they were traveling together from England, and it was the first time that I met proper English travelers,
Mm.
and they are hilarious. They are kind. I remember they were so good at pool, and they would usually win. Once in a while, I would sneak a game out, but they would always go, oh mate, you're such a good player, mate. But I just got lucky." And they never jumped up on that soapbox and said, "In your face, you're terrible."
Not their
So,
way.
but
Not
they
their
were
way.
great. Yeah, not their way, not their
Yeah.
style. And I
No.
was
No.
just so taken by the English. Like
Mhm.
I fell in love with their culture,
Mm.
and did not even go there. But they are well traveled, as well as the Swedes.
Mm.
Sweden travels well, and I found something interesting with most of the Swedes that I ran into, Joachim and Malin. I remember trying to pronounce their names on the train. Tommy says, "My name's Tommy." Okay. Hilsey. Okay. I've got the English. Then I go to the Swedes, and he says, "My name is Joachim." And I said, Yekum, Yukum, Yek. I could not get their names, and I could tell that I was frustrating them with my terrible pronunciation.
Mm.
And Malin was, I kept saying Marlin, but they're married now. They're well traveled, and I was with such a great group of people, and about 13 in total, that I wanted to keep traveling with them. So, although I had planned on staying in Mongolia for about 10 days, I stayed in for 3 or 4 days, and then I jumped on the train to stay with them all into Beijing.
Hmm. So tell me about Mongolia. What's the city like? What's food like? What's the people like?
I don't want to disparage
Oh,
any place that
really?
I've been, but
But
that was, yeah, but there was another guy there named Stewart who had been there for about 2 weeks, and he had been mugged 3 times.
wow.
We actually had to go to a group of four of us. It was two Stewarts and two Bennies, Stewarts and Bennies going out to eat, and he had to buy a new pair of pants because he ripped them running away from his possibly fourth mugger. And one guy wanted to fight us. And there's a great story in my book about when we were coming out of the mountains, and the van had a flat tire. So I got out and walked to a gas station to get something to drink, get a cold drink. And I stepped over, there was a pile of goat legs, right? Like from the knee on down. And in the book, I talk about about being an optimist, and that maybe those goats were, there was a no hoof law in the city, so they took their hooves off and
I'm sorry.
continued
There's just a
walking.
series of there's just goat legs there without the bodies. Just legs.
Just legs, just a pile in the city on the sidewalk.
How many?
And I would say probably about 40.
And they didn't look like they were being prepared to eat or anything. They were just legs there on the
No, they were just there.
Okay. And you
And I
step over
stepped
them.
over those. And I go into the gas station, and there's the attendant lady is on the phone, and she has two friends who are just sitting there looking at me. And there was a cooler full of Coca Colas. There was like uh, bottled Coca Colas, and there was another area with canned Coca Colas. And so I grabbed the two Coca Colas, set them on the counter, and I'm waiting. And the lady has her back to me. She won't look at me. And then finally on the phone, she turns around and in a 360 movement, grabs those Coca Colas and turns around. So now I'm sitting here looking at her friends, and they're kind of going like this. And so I go and I get
Strangers.
two different Cokes. And they said, oh, they had said, she says all the Coca Colas are hers. And I go, all the Coca Colas. And I'm a sarcastic person. I go, so the 1,000 Coca Colas that I can see, they're all hers. And she loves Coke. Right? So even though they don't probably understand me, I know my friends would be rolling. So she then, when I brought two more back, took my money and turned her back to me. And that's Mongolia in a nutshell. They were not well receptive of travelers. They
Hmm.
were not, when I say not a warm reception, I mean a very cold. One guy came out with brass knuckles and wanted to fight our group. And this was midday that we were walking. And he kicked my friend Hilsey in the butt. And I said, Hilsey wanted to fight him. And I said, no, we got to go. Like, let's get out of here. And it was, I wasn't worried, and I think a lot of that has to do with being a Marine and being a bigger guy, and then
Right.
refusing to be, you know. But I could see where they would be, somebody alone would be very scared in Ulaanbaatar.
Very interesting. Would not have expected that. Huh. Because I don't know many tourists that go there, and perhaps that's why, Penny. Perhaps that's why.
And unfortunately, America is a very
Right.
advanced country, and Americans have to remember that when if they do travel, things can be different, and how they are viewed can be different. And unfortunately, in Mongolia, the woman still is not looked upon as the incredible, awesome energy beings that they are,
I see.
right? And they don't like the respect is not there, and that was kind of difficult for me in Mongolia too to understand that.
Mm, mm. Very interesting. So you get to Beijing, and what do you think of Beijing?
I love China.
Yeah.
China is amazing on every single level. I always had really good food, except for in Pingyao, one place in China out of probably 2 months that I spent there.
Wow.
Uh, the food was, I remember eating greasy fried chicken at the front gate of that city until we left. But everywhere else, fresh vegetables. I had a lot of eggplant there. I love eggplant. My mom used to make the garlic eggplants and pierogies and all of that stuff. So um, my dad was Italian, or not was, is
Hmm.
Italian. And so we always had really good food.
Yeah. I didn't know many
But
Italians there in
China,
Green Bay.
my dad grew up in. Oh, this is a whole nother thing for you.
I
If
said,
my father grew up in a mafia family, but he didn't know it. He found out a lot of this. He grew up in Racine, Wisconsin, and he was watching one of those shows about the old mafia, and he just started saying, "Oh, I know that guy. Oh, I know that guy." And he's like, "Wait a minute, why do I know these guys?" And
really?
so he started doing some investigating and found out that he his dad just never told him, right? So it kept him out. And my dad,
Wow.
it's a long story, but it's fun to listen to my father talk about it. But yeah, so definitely Italian.
And now you're in Cambodia, and it's interesting to me that every once in a while when you speak, Benny, I hear a little bit of the Wisconsin. Just every once in a while, it's still there.
The O's and the U's.
Yeah, you just said it when you said show. Yeah, it said show. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I hear it just a little bit. Yeah, very interesting. Did he speak Italian to you at all? Your
No,
father?
my
No.
dad didn't. He didn't know. I'm sure his father did, but
Yeah.
he didn't. Yeah,
And so in Cambodia now for a long time, for 8 years, I believe, right? 8 plus years,
6 years.
6 years, and
But
you're
in
married.
all, yeah, yes, it's
I didn't mean
awesome.
to cut you off. Yeah, yeah, I didn't mean to
Oh
cut you
no,
off.
what I was gonna say is I'm coming up on 6 years of living here entirely, but I really was coming here for months at a time since about 2014. I started coming here for 3 months, 6 months, and I would go to the US and make some money and come back. And then I just
Mm,
had to find that place where my mind and my heart reached the same accord and or reached an accord and said, okay, let's stay. Let's see what happens if we stay in Cambodia. And it has been amazing.
hmm.
Absolutely amazing.
And you love it there. You're staying there.
I do. I do love it here. It's the stress. When I went on my journey, I realized the reality that I could create for myself.
Mm,
And I thought after my journey, why would I stop? I'm just, I don't know, the United States, and I love the US, Marine, served, but the
hoo-ah.
stress levels there, it makes me, the thing is that I feel what other people feel in the energy world or the mystic world. They would say empathic, where it's like when I was telling you the story of that young girl, I almost like I break that, like
Mm,
those feelings hit me pretty hard. So when I'm in the US, the stress levels for me are amplified. And when I am
really?
here, is the stress 100% gone? No, of course not. But it's diminished quite a bit. And it has everything to do with the Khmer culture here. They are, they do not go down that road, Joey. They do not go down that road of stress, of
Mm,
fighting. In 6 years, I've heard two voices raised, and
hmm.
not fighting, but raised voices in 6 years. They
Wow.
just don't do it. And it's such a calm existence. I sometimes find it hard to believe and I'm always thankful and grateful that I am in this culture. And they have enough things here too. Some people think, "Oh, Cambodia, do they have electricity?" Yes, they have electricity. There's a Starbucks here. There's a Burger
Of
King
course.
here. It's a tourist
Obvious
city.
internet access. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So to me, for me personally, my perfect niche in this world is Cambodia, and specifically Siem Reap.
And where you are now. I haven't been back to Italy to my family's place in southern Italy for a few years now, but I do remember the stress level just diminishing.
Yeah,
Just they just view life very differently. Whereas here it's so fast paced and so easy to kind of get caught up in. So, do you practice comedy still there?
I don't, but I just learned that there is a. I just found out there's a man here who used to work at the Comedy Store in LA, and I went to the Comedy Store in LA to practice basically, and so now I'm thinking about going and doing a set or something over at his place. I just
Uh-huh.
found out about it. I practice comedy in the sense of every time I speak, I have students. I'm a teacher here, teaching English as a second language, and most of my students are around 18 years old. And I once in a while I get some non-traditional older students, but I'm
Mm.
always doing comedy with them. When I'm sitting there in the middle of class, all of a sudden I'll just do something like this during the class, and they absolutely they're in stitches, right? They're in stitches when I do it. And that's the thing too, Joey, about being in a culture that is very calm, very reserved, very conservative culture, is when you bring out that they're not used to people being forthright with their comedy. And so when I
Mm.
bring my comedy out, they love it and they are rolling because they have, as we as Americans have images and thoughts and ideas about other cultures, they have about us too. It goes
Yeah, of
both
course.
ways.
Of course.
And unfortunately and very sadly, I think when people see Americans, they think, okay, they're going to be brass, they're going to be
Mm.
rude. So they're
Cowboys.
when they see us, they're very reserved. So when I come out
Mm.
with that comedy, then that makes me instantly like a teacher celebrity, right? Like, okay, we like this guy, we'll listen to him and we'll learn.
Yeah, comedy certainly has a way of kind of leveling the play field a bit and easing tension. Yeah, when people
It
can laugh.
does.
So, do you consider yourself at this point? You're many things, Benny, but this you're primarily an author
Yes.
because you have podcasts. You've
And
done that certainly. You've traveled. You teach. You're gonna maybe pick up comedy again, but you're released your second book, so you're an
yes.
author, full fledged. You're still journaling.
And that is the hilarious thing. I don't really journal that. I do a lot of writing now, but I don't do
Mm.
a lot of journaling right now. And I remember reading about a book written by his wife, John Belushi. And John Belushi would come into these moments where he would be all about something and then he would get past it. And one of the things was, from the Blues Brothers, he really loved very soulful, awesome music, and he got into that music. And I remember thinking, I wonder how they felt, like Aretha Franklin and Ray Charles and John Lee Hooker. How did they feel about being in the movie? John
Yeah.
Belushi revived. They were so thankful for him because their careers were at that point where they were kind of level, and he spiked them again and brought them back up into the mainstream. So they were very thankful for him. But when he got done with the Blues Brothers, he took all his tapes and his music and gave them to a friend. He's like, okay, I'm done with this now. And I kind
Wow.
of felt that way. It was like my mind or my heart or my future self was telling me, hey, journal because you're going to write a book, even though I personally did not know that I was going to write a book.
Hmm. It brings to mind the famous Faulkner line where he said, "Don't be a writer, just be writing." So just continue to write and continue to journal, and then eventually you'll get there. Do you perceive yourself as a disciplined person?
I would say that discipline and determination go hand in hand. And I would say that I'm disciplined in the respect that when I'm determined to do something, I know it's going to happen.
Mm.
And that some people might say, "Oh, you get that from the Marines." And I would say, no, I was a great Marine because of my discipline of who I
Mm.
was. And I owe a lot of that to my father, to Jim Arena. My father has a different last name than me, but Jim Arena, he came in when I was about age 5. It was my brother Joe and my sister Melanie, and we had the run of the house. We were living in Milwaukee. My mom is still amazing, but I think about she raised us. She did not have a refrigerator. She had to go and get milk every day for us. She was a single mother at a time when that was very much frowned upon. But she worked at the Milwaukee Journal. And you know how my mom got her job as a proofreader at the Milwaukee Journal was not because she was the most qualified, but she was the most persistent and kept calling them. And she got the job as proofreader because nobody else wanted that job.
Hmm.
And so I think I get a lot of my determination from her. My dad, Jim, steps into the picture at age 5 and he put down the hammer. No lying. Finish all your food on your plate. And these, it seems like small things. Finish all your food on your plate before you
Mm.
leave. Eat all your vegetables. Eat everything. Even if you don't like it, you're going to eat it because we're your parents and we know what's best for you and we're going to keep you healthy. And that was going out to the farm. We moved from Milwaukee to the countryside in Little Falls, Wisconsin, close to Sparta, on a farm, big old garden. So I was in charge of the potatoes. My sister had the onions, and my brother, unfortunately, had tomatoes. Why, unfortunately? Because my brother was deadly accurate he was a great baseball player, had a
Oh boy.
heck of an arm, and I got hit with a lot of tomatoes. Right? He was too accurate. I don't even think it was possible for somebody to be that accurate from like 100 yards away. He could hit me in the face with a tomato. It just wasn't fair. It was not fair.
It's interesting how you combine drive with discipline, and you had some. Your mother instilled it on you, and then when your father came in, he actually piled up perhaps a little bit more on top of you, and molded kind of your direction in discipline. Very interesting.
Yes,
Very
and
interesting.
it's
How do
clear
you?
to me. It's go ahead.
No, you please finish your point.
It's just so clear to look back on it. Um, One of my favorite lines, and if I could just interject something about writing now, I know there may be some writers listening too. Is it took me 8 years to get the second book out.
Wow.
8 years. I actually wrote it all as one book, but then somebody said that's way too long. It needs to be three.
Hmm.
So the second one was 8 years. There are some lines in the book that were in the initial framework, the skeleton framework of the entire series. But there are some things that came in 8 years later, and um, you've I totally forgot the line that I was gonna. It was something about the universe, but
Drive and
anyway,
discipline.
yeah, you've got to just keep going. If you're a writer, you've got to keep. I love your quote because it's so accurate. I used to think when I was writing comedy and living in New York City, I used to think I needed the right pen, I needed the right tablet,
Mm.
I needed the right desk, and it has nothing to do with
No.
that. You have to just sit down. And I find that when I would sit down and start writing about anything. Just what, okay, today is a nice day. The sun is up. The dog is running around. There's my mom. And you will start to do the physical movement, and then your mind will take over and your creativity will come in. And then you will start writing your gold.
Yeah, very well said, Benny. I've talked to authors where they, something sparked. Maybe it's tragedy, maybe it's something else, and then they said they couldn't stop it. It's just flooded into
Yeah,
them. They're just writing and writing and writing. And I know like musical artists feel this too. Sometimes they just feel it, and sometimes they even write in somebody else's voice. You hear these stories about,
yeah.
you too, Albano and the Edge wrote this one song, and uh, didn't feel it was theirs, felt it was Roy Orbison, and presented it to Roy Orbison, one of his concerts. Roy loved it, and it was the very last song he recorded. And again, they wrote this song, but just didn't feel it was in their voice. They just felt the inspiration. They couldn't stop it, and then it was in somebody else's voice. I mean, the way we receive this is, I don't know where you want to put it, mystical, God, spiritual, wherever you may think it comes from. Not sure if it matters, but it still happens. We get this rush, we get this artistic feeling, and we just can't stop it. Darn it.
I think that is an amazing point that you bring up. And in my interviews, I don't touch on this a lot, but I'm a deeply spiritual person. And when you talk about, hey, this creativity comes in, uh, true artists know exactly what you're talking about. When I was writing my book, I sat down with my friend Stacy, and she went through my initial edit with me, just kind of talking about it. We were out at her cabin, and we would just sit down and go through the book. And there were times where the energy came in, and it was so strong that we had to take a break. And
Hmm.
if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's as if somebody else was writing the book
Hmm.
at points. It felt like my hand was moving, but almost like I was doing zero effort to think about what to write. It just came
Amazing.
out,
Amazing.
and I was writing. And I do think, I do think in the grand scheme, if we could really stand back and see how the unit, if we could unveil the wizard behind the curtain, um, the wizard is a lot of energy. I think that it comes from many different sources. But I believe, like you, Joey, that uh, you don't need to question it. You don't need to know
That's right.
where it comes from. But be aware that it's there,
Mm.
be grateful for it. I thank that energy, and I don't really know who I'm thanking, but
Mm.
I want whatever it is to know that I'm appreciative of
That's right.
uh, being able to. I wouldn't
Thank you.
even say harness, because harness would make it seem like I was going out to
Mm.
try and find it and
A
tame it.
vessel,
It's
perhaps.
not a. What's that?
You're perhaps a vessel of it.
Yes, a vessel. I would like to think that it's somewhere between vessel and harness. That
Mm.
we're not just sitting here and we're nothing, and then all of a sudden we're brilliant. I think that life is about motion and staying in motion. That's one thing that I've learned. I remember as a kid, I took a rock, a pretty good sized rock, and I threw it in the air, and I noticed the pattern was the same with the rock. It kept going through the air. It didn't change. No matter what the size or what shape the rock, it stayed the same. And I realized, especially in my bike taxi years, that you have to stay in motion. The universe, in my opinion, the universe wants us to stay in motion. If you are in motion, if you are working, if you are trying, putting forth an effort, the universe then can like piggyback you and jump
Mm.
in with you and coalesce its energy and mesh its energy with your energy. But if you're sitting still and you're not doing anything, it can't do it.
Hmm.
So it meshes with you as you go along, and then the art comes out.
Yeah, very well said. I agree. Yeah, that song, by the way, if anybody's interested, it's "She's a Mystery to Me." Now, Benny Mailman, how do you measure success?
Happiness.
Yeah.
I It's a decision, man. It's a decision. I tell my students all the time, the best question that you can answer for yourself is, what do you want out of life?
Hmm.
I often mentor my students and think, I wish I had someone like me when I was their age,
Hmm.
just to understand a little bit more about life. We can't get people through life. You can't take someone by the hand and guide them. And parents will say, parents, a lot of my friends tell me about their kids. You think you are going to mold them, but they are their own energy. They are their own soul, and they're going to go the way that they're going to go. You're more like just a guide. Hey, go this way. If you go
Mm.
this way, this will happen. But I tell my students, what do you want in life? If you are after money, then make all your efforts and energy go towards making money. For me, it has always been about happiness, which is why I did not do that well in comedy, because I actually just wanted people to laugh. I wanted to make people happy. And the business side of me is not my strong suit by any
Mm.
means. So
Mm.
if you can, success to me is your reality. Everybody has a different reality, and but make I don't want to tell anybody to do anything, but my suggestion is that you, if you're feeling stressed out and you watch a lot of news, stop
Hmm.
watching the news. Right?
Yes.
People are, and especially the sad thing. I think the saddest thing about the last 2 years uh, with COVID is that we really miss the social aspect of being with each
Mm.
other. You see
Mm.
things are more volatile. People are fighting on airplanes. Um, it's we need. I ask people in my dedication on my second book. I tell people that's things are tough. Things are hard, but the answer is always love. And it sounds hokey to some people when you say that the answer is love. But when you boil everything down, it really comes to that. If you want to be kind towards other people, if you want to help them, if you want to be good to them and have a symbiotic relationship with the world, you need to be kind, at least
Mm.
kind. And if you don't agree with someone, be tolerant. We used to be tolerant. Like
Right.
that's I miss those days. So
Yes.
yeah, your happiness, you can create your happiness. Uh, if you have the ability to create your reality and the understanding that you're in charge of your life, you cannot depend on other people. Depend on yourself. Right? You are so powerful. Each person is so powerful for their own reality.
That's right. And we have complete control over ourselves, not to other humans and to other situations. Yeah. Very, very great advice. So, Benny Mailman, a great pleasure talking with you today. I really appreciate it. Please tell us how you're self published on Amazon. Tell us how we can get your books, your website, your social media, etc. Please.
Okay, I had this made and I didn't know, but I think it fits perfect here. This is just a flat cover of my. So if you go to Amazon, this is what you would be looking for. That's my book cover, Finding 42. And 42 is, you can see my little Green Bay hat there.
That's right. Many are
uh,
listening. So yeah, he showed a picked his I was going to say album cover. His book
oh,
cover, yeah, Finding 42. Yes.
it's a blue cover with
Yep.
Finding 42 being white, and I like Rafael Andres is my cover designer, and on the back he has it's black print, but all the really important words are in white, like National Geographic, my name, the Mekong River, Cambodia, Laos, and they're in white, and I like that. I have always loved the color blue, and the white makes me think that it's like a cloud going through.
Oh,
So
very nice.
um, on the front cover, on the top, they're all photos from my journey, specifically in book 2. So those are really interesting. And my website is bennymailman42.com, BENNYMAILMAN 42.com. And on Twitter, and I'll be honest, I'm not a big Twitter person. But if somebody were to say at Ben Jam and Zen, I would respond. I want people to know that you can get a hold of me on my website, or you can get a hold of me on Twitter or on Facebook, and I would be extremely happy and thrilled to answer any questions you have about the book. Hey, what were you thinking here? What I want people to do that. I think that would be so cool. On Facebook, I'm just Benny Mailman, BennyMailman, and right now I think I have room for about another 3,000 followers. So you could just friend me and okay. And on Twitter, I'm Ben Jam and Zen. So it's like Benjamin, but with two M's, BenJamminzen, Ben Jam and Zen. And actually, from my web page, you can connect to me on everything.
On social
So
media. And we'll put all those links in the show
yeah.
notes. Benny Mailman, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Love talking with you. Good luck to you in the future. Who knows when we may see each other face to face and have that cup of coffee you so love.
I love coffee. Joey, where are you at exactly?
I'm in the
Where are
Northeast.
you located?
I'm right out of New York, in New Haven.
Oh wow! Oh, I would love to come and visit. My wife and I want to. I want to get. My mom is going to New York City with my sister. My sister lives in Annapolis. I think tomorrow. And I
Ah,
said, yeah, I'm very rarely jealous. I said, jealous is a wasted feeling.
emotion,
But
sure.
I'm jealous that they're going to New York City during the holidays, Joy.
Yeah,
You know what it's like in New
it
York
is
City
nice.
during
It's
the
beautiful.
holidays. The
Yeah,
energy, it's like you just float along and you see the tree in Rockefeller Center. And if you're going to see the tree, you need to stand on Fifth Avenue to
that's
get the
right.
good,
Hold on.
full
Yep,
view of it. Man,
exactly. Yeah, Central
I
Park.
do. I miss New York City. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful city.
Thanks so much for your time today. You be well, and I hope to see you soon. Bye now.
Take care, Joey. Thank you.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pin's Discipline Conversations.